The night after graduation, I was still sweeping sawdust off my work boots when I found the truth. My parents didn't even wait for me to come home. They handed our family business, the one I built with my own hands, to my little sister. Mom looked me straight in the eye and said, "You're just good with your hands, not your brain." That's when I stopped the 60-hour weeks, the endless shifts in the cold, the silent pride of making something real out of wood and sweat. And when Dad called begging me to fix the biggest client meltdown in the company's history, I realized maybe they never saw my worth at all. Maybe they never would. So I made the hardest choice of my life, knowing I'd lose the only thing I ever belonged to. Before I dive into my story, I just want to know you're here with me. Drop a hi in the comments, or let me know where you're from. I love seeing how far my story can reach. Sometimes even a small connection makes the world feel less lonely. Thank you. And now, here's my story. If you feel something from my story, or if you've ever felt overlooked in your own family, please subscribe to the channel. It means more than you know. My name is Atticus Voss, and this is how I found the truth under Seattle's rain. The Ballard workshop always smelled like rain and glue. Even now at 30, I can stand in the doorway with my grandfather's old chisel in hand and feel like nothing has changed since I was 5. Outside, the Seattle drizzle pressed gray streaks against the window. My work schedule for the week, all 60-plus hours of it, was marked in red ink on the wall, every job marked Harper Priority. That was the family code. Atticus builds, Harper shines. I tried to remind myself why I still did it. I wanted to turn this damp, neglected shop into a space for sustainable design to take Northwest timber and make it matter again. Some days it felt like I was the only one who cared if the wood told a story, or if it just looked good for Instagram. I used to think things would change. When I was a kid, the only time I ever felt seen was in the glow of my grandfather's fireplace. He'd sit me on his knee, a mug of cocoa in my hands, and spread out pieces of oak and maple on the table. Every ring, every scar tells you what that tree survived. Don't ever cover it up. I carved a little wooden dog for him, sanding it until my hands hurt. He looked at it like it was treasure. But the next day, when I handed it to my parents, they barely glanced at it before turning to Harper's crayon drawing. "Now that's vision," Mom beamed, pinning the sketch to the fridge. "Atticus is handy, but Harper's an artist." The words stung in a way that never faded, no matter how much I pretended it didn't matter. That night, I whispered to my grandfather that one day I'd make furniture with a soul, not just pretty shapes. High school felt like an endless contest I hadn't signed up for. I poured my afternoons into building a chair for the Seattle Wood Festival, sanding and oiling until my arms ached. I won a tiny blue ribbon Best Upcycled design. Dad was at a business trip. Mom was helping Harper prep for her first business pitch downtown, and when I came home with the ribbon, they just said, "That's nice," and went back to their emails. Harper got a standing ovation for a class project. I got a nod and an order to help unload lumber in the rain. That's when it started to click. In this family, value meant applause, not sweat, not hours, not the deep ache in your bones after you carried a 500-pound slab through the drizzle. By college, I was determined to outgrow all of that. I studied supply chain management at UW, hoping the business degree would get me a seat at the table upstairs. But every holiday, every break, I was dragged back to the shop. When a flood took out our main timber supplier, it was me who called the forest managers, who spent a week arguing down prices, saving the company tens of thousands. No one outside the family ever heard about that. Harper snapped a photo of herself posing in front of the finished pieces and got 100 likes by noon. "What would we do without Harper's strategy?" Mom said at dinner, while Dad just grunted and handed me the keys to the van. Upstairs, their office windows were always steamed over, the lights glowing above the shop floor, one world where decisions were made, another where I just worked. Even now, nothing had changed. This morning, I finished hand-planing a 3-meter walnut table for a Portland restaurant, sweating through my flannel while the rain kept beating down outside. The client emailed asking me personally to sign the bottom. I forwarded the message to the company email. Later, I saw the reply sent from the Voss & Company team, signed Harper Brand Director. My name was nowhere. Upstairs, Dad's office door stayed shut. That office, with its polished glass overlooking Union Lake, was never mine. The desk drawer I'd never seen open. The key I never held. Finn was the only one who noticed. He texted after lunch just a photo of a cappuccino at Pike Place, a reminder that I should take a break, dream bigger. Finn always said if you don't build something for yourself, you'll end up a footnote in someone else's story. I laughed it off, but sometimes I wondered if he was right. As I closed up the shop for the night, I swept under the bandsaw and my broom nudged a small tarnished key, old cold maybe dropped years ago. I picked it up, weighed it in my palm, and caught myself staring at Dad's office above. What would I find in that locked drawer? Maybe the answer to why in this family I was always the hands and never the head. The rain was heavier than usual that fall, seeping into everything: floorboards, beams, the walls of Ballard's old shop. I started my morning wrestling with a pallet of local fur that had warped from the damp, desperate to salvage a set of panels for a Bellevue order. The crew called me the walking blueprint. They meant it as a compliment, I think, but I noticed that every invoice, every delivery slip bore Harper's name at the top. She didn't know which end of a tape measure to use, but her signature was everywhere. Dad scheduled all the client meetings upstairs, always during the hours I was supposed to be down on the floor. I'd get an email the night before. Please leave a technical note for the Voss Emery consult at 10 a.m., but never a seat at the table. Every week the team funneled progress reports through me, but I was told to forward them for Harper's review. There were days I'd check the company website and hardly recognize the work. Projects I had spent months designing and finishing were now tagged Harper Creates with carefully staged photos. I'd shot half those pictures myself, cropped out always. I started noticing that my name only appeared in emails from suppliers and customers who'd known me since I was a kid. But even then, if they wrote "Tell Atticus I loved the dovetail joints," Harper's reply came back "Thank you" from the Voss team. One day our main lumber supplier called. "Harper wants to switch from local pine to some imported stuff for the next video," he said. "But I thought your whole angle was Seattle wood." I couldn't answer. The shop was supposed to be a family business, a legacy, but every decision was made for the sake of aesthetics on camera. I found myself spending evenings at Pike Place with Finn, who never let me off easy. "What if you spent 60 hours a week building your own dream, not theirs?" he asked. The thought terrified me. I owed this family my name, my skills, my promise to my grandfather. I'd promised him I'd never let the story end with me. One night I stood alone in the shop, the old oak table my grandfather built glowing under flickering fluorescent lights. There was a fresh gouge across the top, a scar left by someone dragging equipment, no care, no memory. My reflection was faint in the lacquer-tired eyes, rough hands, the kind of face that belonged behind the scenes. I suddenly knew I couldn't keep doing this, waiting for recognition that was never coming. I needed to know what the real plan was for me. I glanced upstairs where Dad's office light was off the desk, just visible through the haze. The old key from earlier still sat in my pocket. Tomorrow I'd find out what they were hiding, before it was too late for me to leave on my own terms. As I shut down my computer, I caught another detail. A client email addressed to me by name had been filed under Voss Team Responses. Harper's reply signed off with her own hashtag. And there on Dad's desk I noticed a folder marked SP55, in his neat handwriting, a code maybe, or just another secret. I memorized it. In a family like mine, the real answers always hid under layers of gloss and locked drawers. And I was done being the last to know. Night fell heavy over the shop, the sort of Seattle rain that seeps into your bones and blurs the world into 1,000 silent drops on glass. I found myself alone, walking circles across the sawdust-covered floor. The lights overhead flickered half the bulbs out, just enough to cast shadows that reminded me how invisible I'd become. There was a strange peace to the quiet, the humming of the machines now silent, every surface slick and cold. I couldn't shake the feeling that my place in this family had never been an accident. It was a system, a policy set in place long before I ever noticed. My hand slipped into my pocket, fingers closing around the small brass key I'd found earlier, dull and almost warm from being held so tight. I glanced up the wooden stairs to Dad's office. The door always locked the window, catching flashes of streetlight through the mist. Maybe it was foolish. Maybe I should have waited, but I took a breath and climbed those steps, each one creaking under my weight and my doubts. The rain battered the old building as if pushing me forward. I tried every drawer, the key sliding into one lock after another until I reached the bottom right. It clicked open with a resistance that made my heart pound. Inside, among half-forgotten receipts and dusty business cards, was a cream-colored file folder marked in Dad's careful hand, Succession Plan, SP55. My throat tightened. I opened it expecting maybe meeting notes or old invoices, but found instead a stack of typed pages and clipped-on contracts. There in plain print was a detailed timeline for transferring full ownership of Voss and Company to Harper on Dad's 55th birthday. My name appeared only in one section. My role was to facilitate technical transition, cease employment within 6 months, sign NDA, and non-compete for 24 months. Scrawled across the margin in Mom's handwriting, reduce dependency on Atticus. Prioritize Harper's public image. I sat back in Dad's chair, the realization colder than the rain outside. Being overlooked hadn't been some misunderstanding. It was the plan all along. I was there to serve to keep things running until Harper could take the spotlight alone. I turned the pages, stomach churning, and found something even sharper, an email printed out half-hidden in the folder sent from Elias Thorne, our biggest client, to both my dad and Harper. It read, "I work with Atticus. If he leaves, I'll reconsider the contract." In thick red pen, someone had written, "Do not CC Atticus. Wait until deal closes." My chest went tight. They'd kept this from me on purpose, not just my parents, Harper too, pretending it was all my fault I never moved up. I pulled out my phone and took photos of every page. My hands shook as notifications buzzed. Harper had posted a new story brainstorming the future of Voss tonight. Stay tuned. The pit in my stomach grew deeper. My role, my worth, was a calculated detail in someone else's story. As I placed the folder back, something small slipped out, an old micro SD card wedged between the pages. I didn't look at it yet, just pocketed it. I was too numb. A single line at the end of the document caught my eye, contingency PR plan in case of Atticus pushback. I stared at that phrase, thinking of my grandfather's words, "Real wood doesn't hide from the light." If I wanted truth, I had it now. I stood up, walked to the window, and looked out over Union Lake, the city beyond, shrouded in rain. I'd spent my whole life working 60-hour weeks to earn my place. In one night, I realized the place had never been meant for me. I watched the storm drift across the lake and wondered, if I walked away now, refusing to sign anything, what else would I lose besides this job? Would I lose my family too? There was no more room for waiting. I had all the proof I needed. The time for quiet endurance was over. I had a decision to make, one that would burn every bridge or finally let me build something for myself. I spent the day rehearsing every possible outcome. My mind played each conversation on a loop. Mom's denial, Dad's irritation, Harper's smirk. I made copies of every file, printed out Elias Thorne's email, and slipped the SD card into my pocket. I called Finn, his voice low and steady. "The only thing you have left is truth. Don't flinch." By the time I arrived at the old family house on Lake Washington, the world was already blue with dusk, the rain falling harder, wind rattling the window panes. Inside, everything looked familiar, but felt different. Mom set the table with her usual care, roast beef and potatoes, linen napkins folded just so. The dining room glowed golden, the old oak table gleaming. But there was a tension under every word, every glance. Harper breezed in, perfectly dressed, all self-assurance, not a drop of rain on her. Dad was already seated, silent, his eyes unreadable. Mom put on a bright face, but the lines at her mouth betrayed her. We made small talk about business and the weather, about Harper's latest campaign, but the food tasted of nothing. My heart thudded with each passing minute. Finally, I reached into my bag and laid the folder on the table, the label facing up. "There's something you all need to see," I said. Harper's eyes narrowed, but Dad motioned for me to go on. I watched their faces as they read the timeline, the transition plan, the clause about my departure. Mom's fork clattered to her plate as she read the words, "Atticus to be terminated after 6 months." "This isn't final," she stammered, "just a precaution in case you..." "Well, in case." Harper looked at me cold. "You know you're good at what you do. But you're not the future of this company." "I am." I always have been. I looked back at her, felt anger and sadness twisting together. You've built your image on my work. All of this, every dollar, every project, every client came from these hands. Dad scoffed, muttering something about business being business. Harper just shook her head. Pretty furniture isn't enough if no one knows about it. I reached into the folder and slid out the printed email from Elias Thorne. You want to talk about business? He's our biggest client and he's here for my work, not the branding, not the videos. If I walk, so does he. Dad said nothing, jaw set, eyes fixed on the table. I went on naming projects, customers' stories of how I'd pulled us back from the brink, each one a reminder of who actually kept the business alive. Harper tried to laugh it off, but her voice wavered. Mom's hands trembled as she reached for her glass. Why are you doing this? She asked, desperate. Because I can't do this anymore, I said. I can't work 60 unpaid hours a week just to be erased. I quit. For a moment, no one spoke. Then Mom started to cry, pleading for me to reconsider, that family should come first. Dad's voice turned sharp. No one is irreplaceable. Atticus. Harper took out her phone, recording herself with the table as her backdrop, narrating her own version of events. Sometimes you have to close one door to open another, her voice so loud it drowned out everything else. I stood, sliding the SD card deeper into my pocket, not trusting myself to say anything more. I looked at the table, the grooves from years of dinners, the place where my grandfather used to sit, and felt both lighter and more afraid than ever. I walked out into the storm rain, slapping my face, heart pounding with relief and dread. The night swallowed me, but for the first time I didn't look back. I kept walking, the proof safe in my pocket. My phone buzzed Dad's name. I ignored it, but the message blinked on the screen. Come back. Thorne's threatening to pull out if you're not here. We need you. I kept walking, the cold finally clearing my head. Maybe they needed me, but I didn't need them, not anymore. After that dinner, I didn't go home right away. I drove aimlessly through rain-soaked streets, windshield wipers, barely keeping up until I reached my apartment outside Seattle. I sat at my kitchen table with the memory card in my palm, wondering if I even wanted to know what else my family had planned. Eventually, I slid it into my laptop and opened the folders, heart thudding in my ears. At first, it was just spreadsheets and meeting notes, budgets, timelines, project schedules. But then I found a folder labeled Strategy, PR Internal, and everything changed. There were line items for social media campaigns built to boost Harper's name, detailed memos about minimizing my presence in every public post, even instructions for staff on how to refer all technical questions to Harper for visibility. I scrolled through a dozen email threads between my dad, Harper, and the marketing team. Key focus: make Harper synonymous with Voss. Position Atticus as silent technician, not public face. My face grew hot as I listened to an audio file labeled Transition Plan Meeting. I heard Dad's voice, then Harper's, talking about how they'd prepare the narrative for Harper's takeover and keep me out of press interviews. If Atticus pushes back, Dad said, just make sure he's not given a mic. Harper laughed and agreed. There was even a draft press release about my decision to pursue hands-on work outside the family brand. That line, hands-on, stabbed deeper than I expected. I couldn't believe how calculated it was, how my achievements had been systematically erased, reframed, and repackaged as Harper's. All those late nights, the weekends I gave up, the deals I saved, each one now a bullet point in a deck for her. The whole time I thought I just wasn't ambitious enough to earn a seat at the table. But the truth was, I'd never had a chance. Every step I took, they'd already planned where I'd end up, out of sight, out of mind. By the time Finn arrived at my door, the rain had turned the windows into silver sheets, the whole world outside blurred and cold. I didn't try to hide my anger. I played him the recordings, showed him the emails, read out the strategy slides with Harper's name bolded in every paragraph. He listened without interrupting, arms crossed, gaze steady. You know what this means, right? He said softly. They have nothing left to offer you except guilt. They can't hurt you anymore. The words hit harder than I expected. I felt the grief of it, the sting of wasted years, but also something lighter, like a weight had slipped off my shoulders. So what now? I asked. Finn grinned. You do what you should have done ages ago. Start for yourself. And take the people who actually value you with you. I sat up straight for the first time in days. I spent that night assembling a folder of proof screenshots, contracts, testimonials from suppliers and clients who'd thanked me by name. I wrote a list of everyone who had ever reached out to me directly: Elias Thorne, a few designers in Portland, the head of the Seattle Architects Guild, and more. I emailed each one asking for support or partnership if I left the family business. For the first time, every message came back positive. They were loyal not to the Voss brand, but to me. That realization hit almost as hard as the betrayal had. In the middle of this, an email arrived from Laura Blackwell, founder of Blackwell Custom Interiors. "Atticus, I'd love to meet for coffee this week," she wrote. "We're looking to build a sustainable design division, and your name comes up in every conversation. Are you open to talking?" I read the message twice, then 3 times, almost in disbelief. Maybe this was the universe opening a window just as every door at home slammed shut. I replied yes, suggesting Pike Place Market, where the best coffee in the city was poured, and the world always felt a little wider. The next day, my phone lit up with another call from Dad. I let it go to voicemail. The text that followed was blunt. "You need to come in. Thorne is threatening to pull the contract unless you handle the Bellevue job. You know what this means." My answer was short. "I'm not coming back." I could imagine the panic on the other end, the realization that after all their maneuvering, they couldn't replace me with a hashtag. For the first time in years, I slept soundly. There was fear in my chest, sure, but it was a clean, sharp fear, the kind that said, "Finally, you're on your own side." I woke to the first snow of the season, Seattle blanketed in a damp white quiet, the city slowed by cold and possibility. At Pike Place, I met Laura Blackwell in the corner booth, her coat still dotted with flakes. She cut to the chase. "We want you to head up our new sustainable woodwork division. You'll have creative control, 40% equity, and the chance to build something from scratch. The only thing I ask is you walk away from Voss & Company completely. Can you do that?" My answer came faster than I thought it would. "Yes. I'm ready." I typed my resignation as soon as I got home. The reply came quickly. My mother called, voice tight with panic. "Can we talk about this? We can offer you a share. Your father will work something out. Don't do anything rash." My hands shook, but not from fear. "It's already done," I said and hung up. For the first time, I felt unburdened. Free. I forwarded my official resignation to Harper, as well copying the entire board. There was no going back. It didn't take long for everything to fall apart. Without me, Dad and Harper couldn't keep up with the technical issues on the Olympic Peninsula project. Thorne canceled his contract, citing loss of confidence in company leadership. Word got out, and suddenly the shop floor was empty. Longtime carpenters called asking if I had a place for them at Blackwell. Suppliers withheld shipments until old invoices were paid. Harper doubled down online, posting glossy videos accusing me of sabotaging the family. "Some people just can't handle success," she said, posing in front of a wall of unfinished cabinets. But the comments under her posts changed. Former clients, craftsmen, even customers began tagging me, telling their stories of what I'd built for them, demanding the truth. Finn and I worked through long nights piecing together the framework for Blackwell's new department. The excitement was electric. Every day brought another email, another client wanting to get on the books. Within a week, our calendar was full for the next 12 months. I watched as Harper's latest campaign flopped, exposed by a former staff member for copying my designs. The viral backlash was swift. "Check Your Atticus Original" trended across woodworking forums. Harper's influencer status crashed overnight, orders dried up, and for the first time, she had to face the real consequences of the game she'd played. Still, I wasn't angry anymore. I felt something different, a deep, calm sense of closure. I stood on the roof of Blackwell's office downtown, looking out over Ballard, the streets and shops of my childhood shrouded in falling snow. There was grief for what I'd lost, for the version of my family that had only ever existed in my hopes. But there was gratitude, too. For Finn's loyalty, for Laura's faith, for every customer who trusted in my hands and my word. I found out about the Voss asset auction from a news alert, the tools, the old machinery, even the company sign, all up for grabs. I went to the auction alone, bid on my grandfather's carving tools, and won. I held them in my hands, cold and heavy, the past and the future merging in that moment. Finn found me in the shop that night, polishing the old chisel under new lights. "You didn't lose a family," he said. "You rebuilt one." I smiled, feeling the truth of it settle deep. I'd always thought legacy meant staying, sacrificing, enduring. Now I knew it meant building, shaping, letting go when the wood tells you it's time. Outside, the snow kept falling, blanketing the city. This time, I felt no need to hide from the weather. I was finally completely myself. By the time I pulled up to the house on Lake Washington, the world was shrouded in the gray hush of late winter rain, turning to slush, the yard scattered with half-melted snowdrifts and the sharp smell of wet cedar. The porch creaked beneath my boots, a hollow echo in a home that once felt indestructible. Through the front windows, I saw the hollowed-out living room furniture, gone, the only things left a few scattered boxes, some old curtains, the white oak table my grandfather built, and my family small and broken in its shadow. My father sat stiff and silent, staring at the fireplace. My mother, her hands twisting a faded napkin, looked up as I entered. Harper was curled into the far corner of the couch, eyes fixed on the dark window, the defiance she always wore now washed out and replaced with something lost. I crossed the room with the old chisel box in my hand, the tools I'd bought back from auction, all that remained of the workshop's past. The silence felt brittle, ready to break at the slightest word. I set the box on the table, the wood echoing through the room. Dad finally spoke, voice raw. He said he was sorry that he never realized what his choices had cost us all, how the favoritism had gutted the business and our family. "If you come back," he said, voice breaking, "I'll sign it all over. The house, what's left of the shop, everything. Just help us rebuild it." Mom's tears started as soon as his words ended. She sobbed apologies, blamed herself. Blamed me, said maybe if I'd just understood, if I'd tried harder, Harper wouldn't be so lost. "She needs you, Atticus. We need you. Please help us make it right." Harper didn't look up. Her voice was hoarse, defeated. "I can't do this without you," she whispered. There was no venom, only exhaustion. I watched them all, the people I'd worked myself raw to please, realizing that nothing I'd ever done would fill the hole left by their choices. I glanced at the table and saw an envelope tucked beneath a stack of old receipts, my name written in my grandfather's shaky hand. I opened it, heart pounding, and read his words. He'd left it for me years ago, but they'd never given it to me. He wrote about legacy, about surviving storms, about how real value came from what you built for yourself, not what you inherited. Don't cling to a name, Atticus. Build something worthy and let it stand in the open, no matter the rain. I looked at my father, then at my mother and Harper, and gently set the chisel box atop the oak table. "I have a new legacy now," I said quietly. "And it isn't here. I hope someday you see the difference." I left the tools as a reminder. Roots don't always hold a tree in place. I didn't yell, didn't plead, just stood and watched the finality of it sink in for them. Harper began to cry loud, and wrenching the last of her pride stripped away. Dad slumped in his chair, the offer to give me everything now hollow. Mom reached for my hand, but I let it slip away. Outside, the cold stung my cheeks, but it felt cleansing, as if the world itself was rinsing away the last of my anger. I stood beneath the eaves as the snow and rain mixed, breathing in the bittersweet taste of freedom and grief. Finn was waiting by the curb in his battered truck window, cracked and heat blasting inside. He handed me an old photograph, me and him, both kids grinning, covered in sawdust, standing in the shop before time and expectation got between us. "Nothing you built was ever wasted," he said. I nodded, sliding the picture into my wallet. I looked back at the house, now just another story behind me. The rain was easing, the clouds breaking above Lake Washington. I walked away with every step feeling more certain that nothing about who I was depended on who stayed behind. Spring arrived with a kind of golden clarity Seattle rarely gets. The offices at Blackwell Custom Interiors looked out over the water, the light so bright on some days I had to shade my eyes. My workshop, lined with new benches and old tools, was full of people who wanted to be there, each person's name and work visible on every project we shipped. The sustainable line I'd designed went viral on local blogs, magazines, even a national feature about how the city was rediscovering craftsmanship. The calendar filled up for a year straight, and the shop hummed with the kind of pride I'd only dreamed about. Journalists came to write about the process, and every article told the truth. Designs that were once claimed by someone else were now rightly credited to me, and the story of what happened at Voss was shared, dissected, and eventually vindicated. Online, the truth worked its way through the woodworker forums and small business sites. Past clients, even old crew, shared stories about what we'd built together, the hours, the failures, the victories. Someone posted screenshots of Harper's old campaigns, comparing them with my originals. The narrative shifted. For the first time, my name was safe in public, not buried beneath a family brand. A local paper did a deep dive on what went wrong at Voss, the manipulation, and the way they'd tried to write me out of the story. People wrote in not with pity but respect, grateful for work that didn't hide behind a logo or a name. Harper left Seattle. She sold the last of her inventory online, retreated to Los Angeles, and faded into the background of an industry that moves on quickly. My parents sold the house on the lake, used the money to open a small carpentry shop out in the country. They lived quietly, no longer chasing growth or praise, but making ends meet on what little skill and reputation remained. Some of the old shop hands, now out of work, reached out to thank me or ask for a spot on my new crew. Suppliers and clients I'd thought I'd lost sent notes. You were always the reason I kept coming back. In the new workshop, I set up my grandfather's chisel mounted behind glass. It was the first thing you saw walking in, a reminder to everyone, myself included, that the only work that matters is the kind you can sign your name to with pride. Finn and I met at Pike Place on a rare sunny afternoon, the city alive with new growth. He raised a mug in salute, repeating my grandfather's old line, "Seattle rain's just a test. The real ones come out stronger on the other side." We talked about everything and nothing, not as old friends lost in the past, but as partners building something new, one honest piece at a time. Later that night, I stood by the water looking across Puget Sound as the sunset turned the sky to molten gold. The pain of the old story was still there, but so was the strength it gave me. I thought about the people who doubted me, tried to erase me, and realized I owed them nothing. My value was never in the applause or the title, but in the hands that never stopped shaping, even when no one noticed. I went home and wrote a short letter to my grandfather, slipping it into a drawer beneath his chisel. I thanked him for every lesson, every silent nod, every hard truth about what matters and what doesn't. I promised to keep building things that would last through any weather. The rain would come again, I knew, but I'd welcome it now, sure in the knowledge that some things truth work, and the courage to walk away endure longer than any family name. Betrayal always cuts the deepest when it comes from family, and this story is a haunting reminder of that truth. Reading how a daughter-in-law could coldly say, "Now that your son is dead, grieve, pack your bags, and never come back," makes us question how fragile loyalty and compassion can be when greed, pride, or resentment enter the picture. It is heartbreaking to imagine being stripped of dignity and belonging right after losing the very person who connected you to that household. Yet at the same time, there's something profoundly powerful about watching someone rise from rejection, reclaim their voice, and discover that resilience often grows in the cracks left behind by pain. Stories like this are not just drama. They are mirrors of what many endure in silence: conflict over money, inheritance, or even just the right to exist in a family space. That's why we share them here, not only to tell you a tale, but to create a space where hidden truths come alive, and justice, even in its smallest form, finds light. If this story moved you, imagine what else lies ahead. More betrayals revealed, more resilience uncovered, more lessons about strength and survival that you won't forget. Don't just scroll past, be part of this journey. Subscribe now so you won't miss the next story that might reflect your own struggles or give you the strength to rise above them. After all, every voice deserves to be heard, and every story has the power to change how we see family, loyalty, and ourselves.